cities, and that's where we all need to live. I mean, historically, cities were dense, but historically, as you pointed out, everyone in society was rural, so it's really kind of, it would be a new concept to think that 100% of the population could live in cities, or 80% in actual urban cities. Because those stats you had were on people in cities, that includes suburbs, doesn't it?
It depends on which stat you mean. Right? The Brazil stat is the urban area, so I mean, the thing is most countries don't have suburbs, and we have suburbs, right?
But I mean, my only point being that people like space. I mean, not everyone. People in New York choose to live in New York, but
so here's what I would do, right? I think there's a simple answer to this, which is fine. You don't have to regulate it away, right? You can just make it a pure market condition. You can say people have to pay for all the pollution they create in their cars. They don't, I mean, where it was written that you had to have a mortgage subsidy from the federal government, I don't understand. I mean, why don't renters get to deduct their rent from their federal taxes, right? I mean, I know this is like heresy in the real estate world to bring this up, but, you know, and let's stop pouring all the federal money that we pour into the highways, right? And so the thing is, I don't have a problem with it if you actually pay the negative externalities of what it costs to society to live that way. And that's the problem. The problem is the suburbs are subsidized to such an extent, right, that you have a market imbalance. And I believe that as soon as you take that market imbalance away, right, you'll start to see people densify quickly. So if people want space, they can pay for space. Right? But, you know, it shouldn't just come on the cheap.
So it's a very good match. Judy.
Well, Vishaan, of course, I've tracked you for years, as you anticipated, and it's easy to understand you're going from architect to city planner, and then getting tired of not being able to afford nice clothes, and then moving on to a developer job, and then this leap into academia. And
Where
so
the clothes are absolutely
fashionable. But then so I, of course, came prepared to kind of nitpick you with little questions about specific things. And the first one, though, would have been, in this move to academia, what are your foundational texts? You know, what's your theoretical stance? And can real estate really have a philosophy? And of course, you've already thought ahead, and you've stepped way, way back, and you now almost seem to have had a sea change of your approach in talking about big global issues and fitting development within an ethical way of living and a very humane approach. But I've kind of wondered, in talking about density, we all know that where we're headed, what you didn't mention anything about kind of people, community boards. I mean, a lot of these big projects have been stopped in the water by, you know, lawsuits, by, you know, build, don't destroy, whatever.
Right.
And so I'm kind of wondering where the kind of community interaction is going to happen in all these big development ideas, philosophies you now.
Yeah, you know, so here's the thing, you're right, I should have mentioned it more. I mean, on the west side, the community board 4, is one of the most extraordinarily kind of sophisticated group of people that you'll ever want to meet. And none of what was up there would be possible without that community board. I mean, the community board, and they're still, you know, they're still undergoing just reams and reams of new zoning texts. I mean, these people who show up on their own time at 8:30 at night going through zoning text, it's pretty extraordinary stuff, right? But here's the thing. I mean, I tried to allude to it at the end with that bubble diagram. I think there's a basic pact with communities, which says, you know, that we'll live with density, right, and we won't be NIMBY, right, if you give us the infrastructure we need and if you preserve the fabric around us that deserves to be preserved. Now, where do the imbalances occur, right? So, on the preservation front, if preservation is used as an anti-development mechanism as opposed to just preserving real fabric, that's not right. On the infrastructure front, it's interesting. So you look at Lower Manhattan. Lower Manhattan's had this enormous boom of residential, right? A lot of it was planned in the Bloomberg administration. It's a huge school crisis in Lower Manhattan. Public schools haven't kept up to the amount of residential construction. Why? Because the DOE won't, Department of Education won't build a school based on projections. They'll only build it when the kids are there, right? So you have this situation where all the residential gets built. Now all the kids are there, and there's this complete dearth of school seats, right? And there's got to be a better way to do that. So I think there's just this basic pact with communities that said, because I think people will go there. I think people will say, we'll live with some tall buildings in our community, right? But you have to give me livability. You have to give me a subway station that works. I have to get up the stairs with the stroller with my kid, right? I think if you can balance that stuff, that people will be there. Right? I fervently believe that because we've experienced it. I mean, for people to come out and say, it's okay to build the kind of density that we were talking about on the west side, which they ultimately have done, right? I think it's pretty extraordinary. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that subway line is under construction, parks are getting built. Those things are important.
Will developers be happy with just retrofitting buildings? I mean, if the preservation comes to me using the buildings that are already built, where's the big time developer going to fit in that?
It's funny, we have all these conversations about the preservation developer. These things, I think one of the things that the school is about these things that are traditionally, at odds with each other, and somehow that instead you figure out how to fuse them. Right. Look, Moynihan's a big preservation project, right? There's a 20% federal tax credit that developers eligible for if they can pull off a redevelopment of the building, right? And so, preservation is absolutely a piece of it. If you look at the Beirut story, I mean, that was done by a public-private partnership with a developer called Solidarity that went around and meticulously preserved these buildings. I mean, there is a way to do this, right? But it's harder, right? It's just fundamentally harder, right? And hopefully part of what our school is about is figuring out how to do those hard things.
So ready to give it a shot?